I hope that I have some things to say that will be of interest to everyone in the hall. So I'm really pleased to be here to talk to you about some of the people issues arising not only from the changes in the expectations of the higher education sector, but also in the context of a wider civic role that I think we're all stepping up to as institutions. I'll also highlight what you all already know about me, which is my passion on the equality and diversity agenda. And of course, this is always a challenge for us in our day-to-day activities, but it is a huge challenge in terms of looking at the leadership of the sector in terms of diversity, and I'll briefly come back to that later. So I want to talk about the crucial role of HR in supporting and indeed often leading the response to some of our most challenging agendas. So the starting point has to be, and we all say it all the time, that change is a constant. It's always a feature of life in our and other sectors. Change is a part of our raison d'etre. It's what universities do best in some respects. They are agents of change. But of course, like other organizations, we resist change along with the best of them. One of the things that excited the founders of the great University of Liverpool in 1881, they were inspired by the advancement of learning and ennoblement of life. They wanted to change lives. They wanted to make life-changing opportunities available to the people of Liverpool. And in the recent release of our new 10-year strategy, we chose to keep this mission statement, or in fact restore it from 1881. And this is not because the way we do things has stayed the same, but that the sentiment was viewed by staff as being central to us, as central to us now as it was then. The words, of course, mean to us that the university exists both to provide outstanding learning opportunities for our students and help them on their individual journeys, journeys in which they'll gain experience that will open doors and allow them to achieve their goals in life. But it also means that we want our research, in many instances our world-leading research, to benefit millions of people around the planet. Only yesterday, Nigel Cunliffe, who's a professor in our health and life sciences, was talking at an open lecture, a very well-attended open lecture, about his work on rotavirus, well attended by school children, and I think they were really pleased they came when he said, "I'm passionate about diarrhea." Probably only in a university could you hear those words. So we want to open doors, and we want our education and our research to allow us to connect not only with our local community, but with other cultures and nations. We think we've got a broad and joined up vision. So one of the things that Carol will have been talking to you about is the way in which we engage with our local community. And we do constantly want to connect with the people of the Liverpool City region, people with all ages and interests, and I think we do very well in terms of the kind of events that we run, performances, exhibitions, and we are big on partnerships, although that's a lecture for another day. But a key message today is that in order for the changing expectations on our sector to be led well, it's crucially important that we have lots of leaders in place who can steer their part of the organisation through the sometimes difficult challenges posed by change. And the HR service plays an absolutely central role here, not only in the skillful and indeed mindful leadership that it models to the organisation, but also in helping others to become remarkable leaders through the development, guidance and coaching that it offers. And I hope that my talk will help you to reflect on your own organisation and no doubt see the similarities that you have with Liverpool. So I touched briefly on our mission in terms of the past and continuing engagement with the local communities of Liverpool. And as I said, Carol's already given you a flavour of some of our work in this area, where she discussed our civic engagement. Widening our engagement with the community that surrounds us and enabling volunteering opportunities for our staff is a key part of our strategy. Why? Well, for very obvious reasons to many, especially in Liverpool, where they definitely feel that John Moores University is theirs. It's of the city. You know, we have to work hard not to be seen as the university on the hill, remote, full of Michael Gove's friends, experts, not as neighbours or friends. But we have so many rich resources, and they can be used in very many different ways to touch people's lives, even if they're not colleagues or our students. So I'm going to talk about some people leadership issues as a result of recent government initiatives, but then I'm going to come back and talk more about, a little bit about equality and diversity and what the HR function in the university means to me and how it contributes to the success of our organisation. And I will be around for a little while afterwards if we don't get to air any questions that you might have, but that Carol will be here for the rest of the conference. So, REF. The Stern Review and recent REF consultation has, I think, if it wasn't in the spotlight before, has really seriously highlighted the importance of interdisciplinary research in the larger research landscape and how we facilitate it, how we measure it, how we make sure that it's not inhibited. So the next REF needs to ensure that fair and equitable assessment of all research submitted is promoted. And as we all appreciate, disciplines which contribute to research across boundaries and borders can lead to extraordinary results. We all know that what hampers this desirable outcome sometimes is that colleagues may prefer to concentrate on the independence of their work. They find it difficult in some disciplines to value collaboration and indeed the larger notion of interdisciplinarity. So where leadership comes into this is that managers will need to help their teams to see that whilst research in their disciplines is crucial, it's important. As Athena Donald, professor at Cambridge, has said, disciplines are convenient fictions. So we are very good in higher education at erecting boundaries. We're less good at taking them down, and we need constantly to be chipping away at the things that may divide us. So HR can help the organisation and its researchers move away from the silo mentality by, for instance, supporting organisational development programmes for researchers that have a very particular focus on building interdisciplinary teams. We can help by designing promotion and reward processes which encourage such behaviour and by helping to establish creative recruitment and development schemes for early career research talent. Yes, these are institutional initiatives, but they give colleagues, both academic and professional colleagues, the chance to rethink their work and the skills to take the initiative themselves. The recent REF consultation left us with more questions, for now, than answers. Is it going to be an all-in approach? Who are the research active staff? How many hours have we got to talk about the contractual issues that may arise here? Can academics take their outputs with them or not? Where are the diversity and equality measures we need to look at? And is impact more important than outputs? So waiting for these decisions, which are significant for us, could make staff nervous, I'm sure is making staff nervous. And whilst we don't have that much certainty as leaders, telling staff just what we do know and what we don't know is as important as anything that we do in our institution by way of communication. Because it's engagement with staff, it's sharing the knowledge that we do have, but also the limits to that knowledge. So I talk to colleagues alongside members of the senior team in a variety of different fora every week. So open meetings, yesterday. We had a professorial tea. We normally talk about the certainties and uncertainties of REF at those. I make departmental visits. We have new staff welcomes. We cover the same ground in many of these meetings, but we are constantly updating stuff. And what I always say is, as soon as I know something, you will know something. Very little in our organisations needs to be confidential. If it affects individuals, as you know better than anybody, then yes, of course. But if it's general information, then we can pretty much share it. These messages are reinforced in I think, in the senior management teams that go on, the meetings that go on right across the university. And I think it has a salutary effect. I think it calms fears and lets staff know that we recognise the importance of these issues, not only to them as members of the university, but them as individuals and their futures, their reputations and their careers. So the skill of my HR colleagues in communication and engagement is greatly assistive in this regard. We get the messages over, I think, at the right time. This is not because we expect HR to substitute for managers, not in any way at all, but just to help us, to offer up a bit of guidance about what it is we need to be talking about, and nowhere has that been more evident than in the recent uncertainties arising from the vote to leave the European Union. We believe that a more engaged workforce is a more satisfied workforce, and I think those results, positive results, are coming from that attitude and have been testified to in our recent staff survey. So to turn to the TEF, I'm sure you're all familiar with the purpose of the Teaching Excellence Framework. Its headline ambitions are to better inform student choice about what and where to study, about raising esteem for teaching, about recognising and rewarding excellent teaching, and better meeting the needs of employers, business, industry, and the professions. All, I'm sure, aims that nobody in this room would disagree with, all laudable. But provoking some immediate people issues. This is maybe one of the biggest leadership challenges that we faced in Liverpool, although I think we were very well prepared. Because over the recent years, we've been building our teaching and scholarship career path and celebrating the success of our brilliant teachers in our staff awards. But we are playing catch-up in terms of the number of colleagues who hold a teaching qualification. And sometimes, in some parts of the university, education has not necessarily been prioritised. So this is why, at the moment, together with the University of Sheffield, we're exploring the development of a collaborative talent management approach to enhancing capacity for educational leadership. We've each run our own pilot programs with staff responsible for leading the education agenda within our faculties. And the aim of the joint work is to enable participants to gain insight into the key competencies which will deliver success with regard to the education agenda, but also, of course, to share good practice across the sector and empower leaders in both institutions to drive forward the agenda. I think that our organisational and development colleagues working with PVCs in both universities have done a really good job in getting this off the ground. Another of our immediate concerns, and one which our student guild, existing and indeed potential students, are telling us is important to them, is the linking of TEF outcomes to universities being able to increase tuition fees. You may or may not know that there are about 8 institutions who have not reached the threshold, and we are one of them. We got to about 43% and the threshold's 50%. So our Guild of Students led a very effective boycott campaign. I have to say that we didn't do anything unusual with our advertising for NSS this year. We didn't have an over-the-top push, because we work very closely with our guild, and we were given the opportunity by Ipsos Mori to reopen the survey for another week to see if we could get to 50%, and I couldn't think of anything that was more likely to hack the students off, so we declined to do that. I like to think that if I was in their place, I'd be doing exactly the same thing, because there's no doubt about the fact that the NSS was not invented in order to set fee levels. It was about improving the student experience and providing good quality information for prospective students. So, having said that, from the practical management standpoint, we have to make sure that the university's finances are sound. We need sufficient resource to do what we've set out in our strategy, and we have to plan and spend that money in order to deliver the best experience for our students. Expectations are rising, and of course so are costs, and they don't sit happily together. HR and finance colleagues are there to help when the income and the costs don't balance. But the greatest contribution that HR managers can make is in the development of leaders to build a creative thinking capacity in those difficult change situations. I'm sure that, again, everyone in the room will agree that a financial stick should not be needed to beat universities into improving the student experience and their overall university lives. I'm not convinced, I don't think many people are, that the TEF metrics being used actually have anything to do with measuring teaching excellence. That said, all of us will have written our narrative submissions with a view to best explain what our educational philosophy is and to give examples of how the way we work is distinctive and of high quality. Our leaders in Liverpool are focused on the delivery of an education strategy that exists because it is the right thing to do, not because we've been told that we have to satisfy some metrics. As it happens, some of it will make us very successful in TEF, but the way in which we enact the strategy is the most important thing, because we can't do anything without our people being wholeheartedly committed. Just to say a few words about leadership in the context of Brexit. Following the result, and as the Vice-Chancellor of a research-intensive university, you might expect me to be very interested in what the outgoing government, and indeed likely future government, is saying about research in the future. And one area they have been talking about is a new UK industrial strategy. And so if we're going to see a substantial increase in UK investment in research and development, this is likely to need a new generation of research leaders who can foster collaborations with the private sector, win grants, and be able to build teams of researchers from a variety of different sectors. This is dependent on having the right skills in the organisation, and again, we will require innovative ways to recognise and nurture emerging talent. People who can facilitate innovative and entrepreneurial approaches. Again, this will be an important area for leadership development, and with HR support, we will ensure that talent spotting and growing our own talent becomes ingrained in our leaders' thinking. Universities have to make sure that early career researchers get a rounded career development experience, rather than allowing them to feel that they're not a part of the organisation because of the often temporary nature of the funding that they work under. We have to actually work hard on this, because we're not doing our young people the kind of service that they deserve. We're not thinking about the future of our profession, and this is a group of young academics who are too easily exploited. We have to ensure that managers take a very mindful and responsible approach to the career development of these individuals. And as part of the development of our future research leaders, experts, entrepreneurs, in Liverpool we believe that PhD students, postdocs and entry-level staff should all be able to gain experience with other higher education partners here and overseas, and spend some time in industry and vice versa. So our academy and doctoral college are focusing on this over the next period. Just staying with the industrial strategy, innovation and commercial activity in universities is rarely rewarded in the same way as four-star research, or even, increasingly, international reputation in pedagogy. Whilst we might acknowledge their work through impact case studies or winning high funding, more needs to be done to capture and record such work as valid activity on an equal footing with research and teaching for career development purposes. Otherwise, as we know, it won't successfully take root. Again, this is something the University of Liverpool is seeking to address through its promotion and pay review procedures and in its training and guidance for managers on appraisals, areas again on which HR take a lead. I mentioned earlier how important leadership is. Liverpool's new academy supports all, from PhD students to PVCs, from pre-apprentices to professional services leaders, in a whole range of development activities, with particular attention to best practice change management approaches. I want to engender leadership capacity in everyone. We have so much important work to do. We can't leave it to a handful of senior managers or rely on some kind of command and control version of an organisation. I want to make sure that everyone knows what a difference they can make to the student experience, for instance, and they can do this by taking the lead in areas where they have knowledge, ideas, and motivation to make changes for the better. Carol and some of her colleagues have worked up a proposal to help PhD students expand their entrepreneurial vision, a development which we believe will enable them to really prosecute their careers more successfully. Through our PVC for Research and Impact, this idea has been taken to the N8 group of universities, where we've proposed some joint working to support the career development of postdocs who are struggling to find a professional foothold. Tapping into the talents of those who are recent doctoral students, using apprentice levy money to build the academic skills bank of the future, we believe shows our commitment to employability and supporting and nurturing new blood in our academic workforces. We will all have in this room some part of our organisations involved in innovation in education, people who are harnessing novel ideas around curriculum and delivery. HR's contribution here is also vital. The University of Liverpool Academy, working with the staff in our Innovation Centre, will communicate ideas more widely and develop staff in those new pedagogies. I've talked about some of the softer stuff here, aimed at improving research, teaching quality and the student experience, but we also have to recognise the tougher challenges arising from the exigencies of TEF and REF. For example, TEF in 2017 will provide institution-level results, but future TEFs, as we know, will go down to discipline level. And whatever we might like to say about not chasing league tables, our performance matters. And having a high reputation helps us to attract and retain the best students and staff in the university. Where performance is not at its best, HR's help in supporting managers to tackle that poor performance can make a huge difference. So now to diversity and diverse leadership. In a range of different fora, and I have to confess that whilst I love being, in a sense, the champion in the sector, I also feel like a broken record quite often, especially if in a meeting, say if at UK board we're looking at a conference programme and I'm looking at a session and thinking, is it going to have to be me that points out that there are 4 people on that stage and they all have the same colour and gender? And I wait for a bit and then I say, somebody has to mention, oh, yes, whatever. But I just wish it was somebody else. I do wish it was somebody else. And I did invite Greg Clark, when he was our minister, to nominate a champion on the Mervyn Davies line, because there's no doubt about the fact that Mervyn's leadership has made a huge difference to the board, the diversity of board membership in the private sector. Anyway, we will continue to challenge. We will, as a sector, tackle inequality and do it with real energy and determination, if sometimes a little bit of irritation. Equality needs to be more than an aspiration. It's a right, as again, I don't need to tell this audience, everyone should be able to enjoy. And yet, often people's experiences in organizations fall short. It's really, really important that in the diverse, the famously friendly and international city of Liverpool, that the university aspires to become a beacon of best practice in equality and diversity. Our ethos is one of inclusion, making higher education accessible to all with the ability to benefit. Our widening participation agenda covers not only students but also employment, creating an environment where people gain experience and succeed based on their commitment and their potential, not what or who they are, is what we stand by, as some of you will have heard from Carol yesterday in her session. But to get there takes hard work, and maintaining a culture where anything short of equality of opportunity is a constant endeavour. We have to be honest about the challenges we face as a sector. According to the last set of HESA data, there are around 200,000 academic staff at universities across the UK. 158,000 of those staff are white, 3,200 are black. In 2015, only 1 in 4 professors in the UK was female. Only 6 of the 24 Russell Group universities have higher than average female representation among the professoriate. 8.5% of adults in the overall workforce have a disability, yet those with disabilities make up only 3.9% of academic staff. From 2012 to 2016, a total of 19 women became university vice-chancellors out of 66 new appointments. It's about 29%. For many years, the proportion of women vice-chancellors stood at around 1 in 6, or 17%, so change may be happening in this respect, but it's at a slow pace. And since VCs tend to come from the professoriate, and the professoriate is roughly around 26%, you don't have to be a genius at maths to see that these numbers match. Ensuring equality of opportunity at our institution for staff is essential, but the same applies to students, most of whom will soon embark on their careers, and who we would want to see champion a diversity and equality agenda in their new organisations. They need to see universities modelling the behaviours that are non-discriminatory and better than non-discriminatory, active in preventing any protected characteristic from having a detrimental impact on a person's career progression. And this means that we, as universities, must recognise in a completely open and honest way that people's identities and social positions are shaped by multiple factors. And where we think we have equal and fair treatment in, for instance, in our application, our interview processes, people have not experienced fair and equal treatment. They may have experienced fair and equal treatment on the way to that application. So we need to be mindful about the multiple factors and that affect their lives and how they create unique perspectives and experience. 2014-15, white women accounted for only 23% of professors, only 6% of professors BME men, 1.6 BME women. We've got a long way to go before we can say that we are role models for our students. Again, people in this room will be more familiar than most with these data. So they are challenging, but we have to overcome the hurdles before us. It's very easy, and how often have we heard it, that things are too difficult to change, that somehow supporting diversity is a nice to have add-on to the core business of teaching and research. Equality and diversity, that's core business. So we need to be proud to be institutions that recognise and value people's differences, organisations that capitalise on the strengths that these differences bring to our universities, and places that systematically show belief in everybody's potential. And this means that leadership at all levels of the organisation needs to be ready to challenge the status quo. And that challenge needs to be visible in order to effect long-term sustainable change. And I'm really pleased and proud to say that this week it was announced that the University of Liverpool's achieved institutional silver in the Athena Swan Awards, as well as silver in 2 of our research institutes. God bless Dame Sally Davis. So the work that we do through projects such as Athena Swan will make a difference, but fostering a culture which promotes equality and diversity is good for the future of the whole university, not just for gaining awards. A recent report by the Equality Challenge Unit, The Rationale for Equality and Diversity, How Vice-Chancellors Are Leading Change, identifies that organisations which take deliberate steps to enhance their diversity inevitably improve in a number of key performance measures overall. If we have to make an argument for embedding equality and diversity in everything we do, then improving performance is not a bad one. Every step we make to becoming a more diverse institution contributes towards improving the quality of our organisations overall, and again, will contribute to our civic leadership role. Moving towards equality is not only a moral issue, but a social one too, and it's vital to future economic growth in the United Kingdom. The McKinsey Global Institute report, The Power of Parity, Advancing Women's Equality in the United Kingdom, identifies that bridging the UK gender gap in work has the potential to create an extra 150 billion on top of business as usual GDP by 2025, and could translate into an extra 840,000 potential female employees. Every one of the United Kingdom's 12 regions has the potential to gain 5 to 8% in GDP. And as big employers in our regions, we can and must make a significant contribution to this. So I've talked about the arguments for leading diversity, but what are the benefits of a diverse leadership team? Well, in the senior executive group at Liverpool, there are 8 women and 11 men, but our diversity in other characteristics is not so good. We range in age between our early 40s and mid-60s, and we're all white Europeans. We can at least walk the talk in terms of gender equality, but we have to remind ourselves that our lack of diversity in other ways means that we have to be ready to work on unconscious bias, amongst other things. We meet regularly with our partners in China and Singapore, and actually it's quite a good check to be kept on your toes, because they're not afraid to highlight the judgments that we make based on our own cultural setting and mores. Diverse leadership has many advantages. As transnational organisations, universities do have a more ethnically diverse, those that do have a more ethnically diverse leadership will enhance their global and cultural knowledge, and in the end that will lead to better performance in international partnership working. So having a diverse leadership team will help also in the war for talent. People are generally attracted to places where they feel at home with the people they're working with. This works with academics and with professional staff. If people from BME, LGBT communities can see an environment where diversity clearly matters, then they will, I think, feel able to commit themselves to those organisations. And we all need to attract, develop, coach and retain the next generation of world-class staff. So to conclude, I started the speech by talking about the sector and some of the challenges we're all facing in the light of new government requirements. And I'm just going to finish off by talking about why HR is important, centrally important, to the success of the organisation in meeting all the challenges we face. Apart from the day-to-day, advice on recruitment, retention, performance, which is, of course, the mainstay of a great HR function, some of the most important contribution that HR can make is around the university's atmosphere. The bit that's often intangible, but relates to the culture of the organisation, the way people feel about the place, how engaged they are with what we're doing, and whether they can see a fit between their skills and interests, and what objectives the university has set itself to achieve. And I'm going to finish with a little anecdote that illustrates that. The senior leadership team works with lots of different HR colleagues on diversity plans, on appointments, on promotion panels, on consultation and communication events, And I think that my colleagues in HR would agree with me when I say that our most enjoyable joint working is when we're listening to what staff have to say and can deploy their views in implementing change that will make a really positive difference to their work environment. I was very happy to get the results of our staff survey carried out in November last year, because 90% of our staff say that the university is a good place to work. 93% enjoy their work, and 86% say they've got the right equipment and means to do the job. Of course, not all the results were so stellar. Stress and workload are perennial features as being high in staff concerns, but we're responding, and HR are running university-wide focus groups on what we can do to deal with these issues, as well as advising departments on their plans to tackle staff concerns more locally. A couple of examples of what the HR team in Liverpool are doing, things that are really important to me. The externally facing work they do with businesses and other public bodies in the city, volunteering programs like Give, Get, Go and Volition, which Carol's workshop session was based on yesterday, and indeed their work with young people who are not in employment, education or training on the pre-apprentice program that they run. These contribute enormously to good public relations and to our reputation. And perhaps they're things that some wouldn't expect from university HR departments, making a real difference to local people's lives. And on the not so local, yesterday I did an open meeting in the School of Physical Sciences. That's the home to the Department of Maths, Physics and Chemistry. I talked about manifesto promises, I talked about the sector's priorities for the next government. I said that top of every list of every leader in the sector is the future security and well-being of our colleagues from the European Union, from outside the UK. And after the meeting, one young lecturer approached me to thank me for the senior management team's vocal support for him and others like him. He's a British national, but his wife is a Czech national. One of the things that he wanted to talk about more than the headline stuff was the support that he's had from HR. Drop-in clinics, legal advice, just general arms around our colleagues' behaviour. I didn't initiate that, HR colleagues did. And I'm sure that that story could be replicated in any of your institutions. Ever so occasionally, adversity provides the opportunity for people to experience the benefit of having professionals like our HR colleagues, not only supporting their work every day without them realising it, but much more directly able to intervene in their lives. No one would want them to be living with the uncertainty and insecurity that they are experiencing at the moment. But at times like this, it is possible to draw positive benefits in terms of the hugely benign, proactive, and supportive work of HR professionals like you in our universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such an insightful and thoughtful presentation. We really do appreciate that, and we do have 20 minutes for questions and answers. If you wish to ask a question, if you just raise your hands, but please do share your name and the name of the institution before you ask the question. So, who would like to go first?
Hi, Janet. I'm Margaret Ayres, HR Director at Queen Mary, who also got silver this week, I have to say. Athena Swan, quick plug. I wondered if you could just say a bit more about the mindful leadership, particularly in relation to academic development, what you mean by that and what you've done.
Thank you, Margaret. I think it's fair to say, Carol will give me the nod, that it's always work in progress. But one of the things that I'm absolutely determined about is that professional development is professional development. It's not academic staff professional development, it's not professional staff academic development. So we're bringing all CPD together in the Liverpool Academy. And it's going to be those people who are working on the academic side, working with those who are more used to working with colleagues in professional services. So that was mindful. That was very much as a result of a lot of conversations about where will this best be placed? How can we mainstream CPD? I talked in just now about the fact that we were very far behind on teaching qualifications in terms of our academic staff. Why is that? Is that because somehow the access to that was explicit to new members of staff, but not to continuing members of staff? So we've got to up our game, and that doesn't happen accidentally. But we also have to, to consider colleagues who have hybrid roles, because increasingly people are in roles that are neither one thing nor the other. Where are library professionals, for instance? Where are those people who work in careers and indeed in staff development? So I talked about silos between disciplines. We need to make sure that professional development is seen as a really positive thing for everybody in the organisation. And that takes a lot of effort, because it's not people rolling their eyes and saying, I have to do this. Although, of course, there are certain things that everybody has to do. And it concentrated minds no end when we cut off access to any kind of email or internet for those people who hadn't done the online training. So it was an interesting day. But we lost 600. They never came back, so that's quite good. So, not members of staff, I hasten to add. So, but it's also about the way you talk about it. I've always been a CPD junkie. I've always been what can I learn from this? And so I think the way we talk about it as well, the attitude to it, it's not an eye-rolling, obligation. And, in the context of PDR, making the PDR a positive staff development event in people's lives is the most important thing that we can do, I think. So I think we can't ever afford to say it's a matter of routine. It's constantly a getting out there and selling it again kind of thing, in terms of the difference it can make to people's lives and how colleagues can learn from each other. I was hearing yesterday in physical sciences about a group of young academics who run open workshops for anybody on coding, and the variety of different colleagues who have taken that opportunity, from people who work in the halls of residence through to current undergraduates, through to more aged professors like me. So not that I've done it, I have to confess, but so it's about making sure that it's energetic and positive, I think.
Thank you. So another question, please. Back over there.
Hi, Janet. Thank you. It's Sarah Shaw from Odge's Interim. Do you see an increase in grammar schools, which is Theresa May's particular passion, as a genuine means of widening participation, or a way for middle-class parents to attain for free an education which obviously enables just their offspring to rise to the top, thereby enjoy the opportunity to attend the best universities?
Sorry, Sarah, I missed the vital third word. Do you
see an increase in grammar schools as actually widening participation, or is it more for middle-class parents to attain for free education to get their children to the best?
Sorry,
grammar schools.
Grammar schools. We don't need Dr. Freud for interpreting why I couldn't hear those words. I went to a grammar school. That's what people who've, the majority of vice-chancellors actually are not privately educated. The majority of us in post now, or in my generation of vice-chancellors, went to grammar schools. That was the system. I never had a day's tuition before taking my 11 plus. I don't think people did then. You just took it, you passed, you failed. Well, of course, it was easier to pass if you were a male, but that's another story. True, have the evidence. It's a hugely divisive issue. I'm sure that in just randomly to find a place, Sarah, in Solihull, the parents would not be thrilled if you brought back grammar schools, because what you'd be bringing back is secondary moderns, because necessarily only a certain percentage can pass, and then the rest have to fail in order to make those schools the proposition viable. So I'm not a fan, and I don't think that it will make a tangible difference in terms of universities' behaviours if they already have a fairly, in a sense, exclusive means of recruitment. Then that will continue. We work very hard. We have 11,000 interactions with students at schools and colleges in the Liverpool City region every year. I've been asked if we would set up a grammar school, and I'd rather privilege the 11,000 than the few hundred that might be in that. So the people who send their children to grammar schools, you can't blame them. Everybody wants the best for their child, but I don't personally support the rollout of the programme.
Thank you for the question. Okay, we still have some time for more questions.
There was one right at the back.
Oh, there is that, right, thank you.
Claire Curran, Durham University. Janet, thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting, and congratulations on getting your silver for Athena Swan. I'm really interested, as a university that's actually on that journey at the moment, if there's any pointers that you can share with us that you and your executive team undertook to help the institution achieve that success.
Right, that is a question that I think Carol could probably shed more light on than me, but just an overarching point is that improvement is always the goal. We're not perfect, any of us, and unless you can demonstrate that you are constantly on the journey towards continually questioning and looking at the systems and the processes that you've got in place, then in a sense you won't do well. Carol, what would you add?
So many different comments about this is just for women in the first instance, that actually having an EPVC that was a man chairing our group was a really good strategy, and get people and get other male academics engaged in the process, and don't. Obviously now it's wider. Don't just focus on academic science. STEM subjects, make sure that you are looking at every category and what you might do in order to ensure that equity, that we're addressing some of those equity issues. So those are a few hints, Claire, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about it separately. Okay.
Yeah, the other thing that we had mainly Carol and I had a long conversation about with Ken Badcock, who leads for the institution, and again, it comes back to my opening point, doesn't it? If you've got a bloke up there championing E&D, it's harder for people to say, oh, this is all about fixing the women. But we weren't sure that we were ready to go in for this. We weren't sure that we were going to do well, but we thought, we'll do the ungirly thing, we'll give it a go. So.
Thank you, Claire, for the question, and Carol for answering some of that question. So, any more questions, please? Far left.
Sue Chambers, Aberystwyth University. Why has the sector not had more success in terms of the representation of BME staff at the senior level? Is it that we have not addressed sufficiently positive action?
Yeah, if I knew the answer, we'd be doing it, wouldn't we? But I can only think that it's pretty much the same as it is with gender. It's pipeline, so it's about people getting access to the right job opportunities. There was some work done recently by the Equality Challenge Unit, the most recent work, that talked about the different experiences of different groups of academics, and it was almost invariably the case. Margaret was there with me at the presentation, and Patrick, is Patrick in the hall? No. That almost invariably groups of staff from BME backgrounds were disadvantaged by not being tapped on the shoulder for things, by not being encouraged, by not having CPD opportunities put their way. You know, it was specifically a survey about the kind of working environment, and in every category, they were less likely to have the opportunities that would lead to career advancement, you know, put before them. I know we can all be self-starters and put ourselves forward for things, but that gets as wearying as, you know, always raising your hand to point out the lack of diversity. So we need to be very careful about that. I think things like Athena Swan and the race charter mark are going to help, because they will make us as mindful in terms of BME colleagues as people are learning to be as regards gender. But, you know, of course, intersectionality is as important in many of these instances as straightforward categories. So we need to do more. We need to do more on the pipeline. We need to find out more why people aren't getting through to the senior leadership positions. And as I said, we perhaps should do more by way of unconscious bias training as a matter of routine in our universities.
Thank you, Sue. Okay, I think we have time for one more question, please. Mary.
Mary Luckyram, City University of London. Janet, I wanted to ask you about the elect president of UUK aspect of your persona, if you like. And for many in the room, we may not really know that much about that role. If we were on your interview panel and were asking you what you think you'd want to achieve in the first 100 days of being the president of UUK, or what were going to be your priorities, could you perhaps share some of that in terms of your work going forward from when you take up the role?
Thank you. So I've got a bit of a gift as president of UUK from August 2017 to August 2019, because 2018 is the 100-year anniversary of UUK. It was set up as CVCP, Committee of Vice Chancellors and Principals. So we've got an anniversary year in the middle of my term of office. So I've already talked to colleagues at UUK about a celebration of higher education right across the country. And we've got to be mindful about the 4 nations, because higher education is one area in which, you know, of course, we are diverging more and more with every set of legislation. So a celebration of the positive benefits of higher education, about our centrality as employers, as people, you know, as colleagues who work together really to change the world for the better and to educate future leaders. So there'll be that celebration. I also, you know, I'm very keen on the values piece, so standing for something. So, for instance, the opening speaker at the UK conference where I become president, I don't think there'll be a coronation, disappointingly, but anyway, it's going to be Mary Robinson. And I grovelled and begged her to come and tell Vice-Chancellors off. And she's going to do that. She's going to talk about climate change as a human rights issue and what more we can be doing in our institutions around the science, but also around the social science and the influencing and the politics. So I hope Mary will let them all know what's coming their way. I'm going to be one of those student union presidents who gets out of bed. That's what it's going to be like. So, you know, and when I was chairing the National Student Survey Advisory Group, I used to have a lot of back and forth with David Willits, who I got on with very well, and he's a very positive person. But he had some peculiar notions about contact hours. And when we were putting the key information set together, we were having quite a lot of argy-bargy about what should go in and what it should look like, etc., and whether it would constrain, which was my line, student choice, if you were too deterministic about what that might look like. One of my colleagues at HEFC reported to me that they were having a discussion about such things, and he sighed and said, well, I'm not going to get anywhere on this unless we can get it past Janet Beer. The proudest moment of my career. So anyway, a bit more of that maybe? Yeah.
Thank you very much. If we could all thank Janet Beer for a fantastic presentation. Thank you.